And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never-dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 113th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 492nd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, February 28th, 2019, one day before we all convene in Bloomington for our annual trip back for a game, our team dinner, and our audience meetup, which we're so very looking forward to. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred at the 9:39 mark of the first half in Indiana's 75-73 double overtime victory over Wisconsin. This is when Race Thompson checked into the game for the first time. To set the stage, this was a few possessions after Wisconsin had their 5-point play, which came courtesy of poor interior defense from Evan Fitzner and a still wobbly Deron Davis, who was fresh off his pregame puking. In short order, a 12-12 tie had become a 17-12 deficit, and an emotionally downtrodden Assembly Hall felt pensive, or at least it seems so watching on TV, or maybe I'm just projecting how I felt sitting on my couch at home. Regardless, the Hoosiers needed a spark, and they were about to get one in the form of Thompson, playing in his third game after losing most of his freshman season to what I've had described to me as one of the worst concussions folks inside the program have ever seen. Juwan Morgan made the first of a 1-and-1, making the score 17-13. Race checked in and drew the assignment of Ethan Happ, who had already scored 8 points on 4 of 6 shooting. Indiana's defense was actually playing pretty well up to that point, except for the fact that the Hoosiers had no answer for Happ on the block, as has been the case for 4 straight years now. But on the next possession down, with Race bodying him up, Happ missed a hook shot. 2 possessions later, Race grabbed a rebound. 2 possessions after that, Happ missed under the basket again. And 2 possessions after that, Happ missed another hook shot. The only scoring Happ did during that stretch was making 2 free throws, and given that he's a 44.1% shooter from the line, making him earn some of his points from the stripe was surely part of the game plan. In all, Race played 6 minutes in the first half. He secured 1 rebound, held Happ to 0 of 3 shooting, and played a big role in Indiana outscoring Wisconsin by 4 to tie the game at 25. For the game, during Race's 21 minutes on the court, Happ went 1 of 6 from the field and 3 of 6 from the line. After the game, Archie praised Race's willingness to be physical and play tough. It's something Indiana hasn't had enough of in the post this season and in seasons past. And it does make you wonder how much better the Hoosiers' record might be with a full season of health for Race. Alas, we'll never know. But what we do know, after seeing Race play for only 44 minutes this season, is that he's going to be a huge part of Indiana's future. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he remains the Fran McCaffrey of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati. He is the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and he is a world-renowned bracketologist. And if you think I'm way off base for comparing our mild-mannered Andy to the lunatic who coaches at Iowa, just remember that Andy has been known to lose his cool on this show, too.
Oh, crap. No, stop doing that. Hey, you shut up. Yes, in addition to being comfortable, the sweatshirt is a great thing that you can use to cover your mouth and scream obscenities into while you're watching a game like this. It's time to shut the down, folks.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, your bottoms line on the last week in Indiana basketball.
Man, I'm going to make sure I don't sit next to you at the game. You might get some more material to use in these later. So I'll
people would be so shocked if
make
they
sure
sat
I choose
next to you during a game.
I choose wisely. Anybody that sat next to me during one of my kids' games, though, would not be surprised. So be that as it may, here we are. This season just continues to be crazy. I thought Galen had a really good albeit strange analogy on Crimson Cast where, you know, if anybody used to read those choose your own adventure books as a kid, he said this season has basically been like reading one of those straight through without following the instructions, where a series of seemingly unrelated events just get pieced together into a story overall. I really thought that was, I found myself nodding as I was listening to that you just look, and the games that this team has managed to win have been probably two of the more improbable ones on the schedule during this last 14 game stretch. And so, you know, 2-12 in those 14 games and win arguably, if you rank them, maybe the two least winnable games historically for IU during that scenario, which I guess maybe makes it more possible than you might think that this of all seasons might be when IU strings together some kind of weird late season run. For now, I'm more of the one game at a time mode, and I think they have at least showed up since that Minnesota game and given some pretty consistent effort in each of the 3 games since then. And as I mentioned on the show after the game on Tuesday night, it was impressive to see them be able to bounce back after going on that, watching Wisconsin go on the 20-3 run in a game that IU seemed to have control of. It would have been pretty easy to fold up shop and head home. So this team has given itself a chance and given itself some hope, and looking forward to seeing their next game in person. If they can win that, then I'm sure Coach and I will be bombarded with even more tournament scenario questions than we already have been, and more so than you even have planned during the rest of the show.
I was going to say, get ready. To my right, it is not Ryan Phillips, who is en route from San Diego to Bloomington for our annual trip.
I love that town.
We all do. But taking Ryan's place, he is our Will Sheehy, he's our Max Bielfeldt, and he's also our coach and the clear fan favorite among all Assembly Call hosts.
Popping the collar.
It's the coach, Brian Tonsoni, whose Western boys basketball team unfortunately lost their first sectional game earlier this week. Coach, we were all sorry to hear that, but we're a little happy that the consolation prize is that we get to see you this weekend.
Thanks. I appreciate that. If you got to lose and get knocked out of the tournament, it's always nice to hang with some good guys like yourself in a great town like Bloomington. Unfortunately, the lack of offense travels from IU to, as a fan, to the team that I work for. So, but Indiana basketball, it seems like, short of the Minnesota game, the last 4 or 5 games have been more like the first 12, 14 games when IU is a lot more competitive. It's good to see that. It's good to see that the program didn't shut it down after the long series of wins, and specifically the last 3 games have seemed to be a little bit more like we would want as fans. Obviously, we would want more victories than that, but it's the style of play, and I think it goes to having depth again. Ability to play people some less minutes if they're not competing at the right level or playing at the right level. Getting some people to have a chance in moments like Fitzner at Iowa to make a contribution. Thompson, as you mentioned in the banner moment. I think that's the structure of the team coming into the season, and it's just never, ever really been part of the season. And hopefully that'll give some pause to all the craziness of the year about whether this program's headed in the right direction or not. If Indiana can win a couple games down the stretch and make a good closing run, maybe people can see that it not all is lost, and with a little patience, things might turn out to be a little bit better. And at least that's the hope from my aspect. But it seems like it's been better basketball. There's some things about executing late game that players need to do better. It seems like the other team's been executing late games and Indiana hasn't, that still need to be cleaned up in order to win consistently. But I think it's been nice to just take a deep breath again and see Indiana basketball compete again.
Absolutely. All right, on tap this week, we're going to talk about keys to victory over Michigan State. And I just saw some kind of breaking news in the chat mob from our buddy Josh Wilson, who will be co-hosting our post-game show after the Michigan State game. So we'll get to that and how that might impact the game. We're also going to look ahead to some realistic end-of-season scenarios and see what that might mean for tournament play for Indiana. And then we'll talk about some of Indiana's building blocks for the future and answer your questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, though, let's do as we usually do in this spot, and let's talk about sleep. And if you stuck around for AC After Dark a couple weeks back, then you heard our expansive conversation with Megan Mahaffey.
Hi. She
is our longtime Assembly Call listener and an original chat mobber. And Megan was recently in the market for a new mattress, and she and her husband decided to give Comfort Option a try, and she was nice enough to join us and share her experience, and naturally, I chopped up the audio to use in fun, out-of-context ways.
I just sneezed, and it's the worst thing that has ever happened to me.
But also in useful ways, like sharing why you should give Comfort Option a try. For example, if you live in Indy or Bloomington, you can schedule Comfort Option's revolutionary in-home mattress service. Why is that cool?
There's a van with a bed in it, and they just put the mattress together right there, and you lay on it and you decide if you like it or not.
Plus,
they don't charge you extra to come build the mattress at your house.
Seriously, they don't. And if you don't live in Indy or Bloomington, you can still order one of their Alpha mattresses online, and they'll deliver it anywhere in the U.S. Megan and her husband went with the Alpha Medium.
We've been really, really pleased with how the Alpha Medium has felt. I am physically sleeping better.
And to top it all off, Comfort Option offers a 30-90 satisfaction guarantee to make sure you love your mattress.
I actually got an email this morning from Comfort Option, just checking in. How's everything going? Do we need to make any adjustments? Because they will do that with the Alpha mattress too, folks. They will let you sleep on it for 30 days, and then they'll work with you to kind of swap things out and make it more appropriate for what you need if you find it's not working for you, which is awesome.
Bottom line, they want the mattress buying experience to be more pleasant than it's ever been.
The whole thing, start to finish, went incredibly smoothly.
Mission accomplished. So go to comfortoption.com right now and either order your Alpha mattress or schedule your in-home mattress store service today. And when you do it, use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $50 off your purchase. Again, comfortoption.com, promo code ASSEMBLY for $50 off. Get the mattress that's right for you. Don't leave your sleep to chance. It's too important.
We want you to live.
Yes, we do.
Can we get some basketball, please?
Okay, back to talking basketball. So I want to, before we dive into Michigan State real quick, I just want to, I know I said this on the post-game show after the Wisconsin game, but this is the first episode of Assembly Call Radio that we've had a chance to do since Kent Sterling, since his show got canceled on CBS 1430 in Indianapolis. And, I don't know if everybody knows this, but the reason we started doing this weekly show was because Kent Sterling gave us a slot on CBS 1430, a weekly slot. And we had been doing shows every other week. But, Andy, you recall, that's why we started doing the weekly show. And this Thursday night show, this ability to talk about the Hoosiers, but even more importantly, to come on here, hang out with you folks that are in the chat mob and have something for you listening on the podcast Thursday night and Friday morning, that wouldn't have happened with the regularity that it does were it not for Kent Sterling. And so I would be remiss if we didn't thank him for believing in us, for giving us that opportunity, for inspiring us to take the next step to do this every single week. This is 113 straight weeks that we have done this. It wouldn't have happened without Kent. He's an awesome guy who uses his platform to lift other people up. Follow him on Twitter at Kent Sterling. I know we're all excited to see what he's doing next, but we have to say thank you to him because he's a big part of why Assembly Call Radio even exists.
Yeah, I would echo everything that you said. I just texted him today and shared some of the same thoughts that you did, and he said it already. Sounds like he might have some things in the works. So, as I think all of us would expect, I'm sure he's a guy that will assuredly land on his feet and be back on the airwaves before we know it. But definitely, this would not have been possible without his support and encouragement along the way. So we definitely appreciate it.
Yep. Okay, so let's hop in. Let's talk real quick about Michigan State. Obviously, Indiana has played them once. We've beaten them once, and we all know, what happened in that game. Indiana played hard. They played together. They made 10 3-pointers. This team is going to win some games, and they can make 10 threes. So obviously, a key, as it's been in seemingly every game, we've got to compete at the three-point line, at least to a draw. And if we can make 10 3-pointers again, that would obviously be great. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on what the keys in particular to this game are. Nick Ward will not play. Joshua Langford, of course, has been out for a while. And I just saw Josh posted in the chat mob that Matt McQuaid, who has been one of their best defensive players, questionable for the game. Apparently reports state that he sprained his ankle in practice. I guess he is likely to play, but, an ankle, if he's, at all hobbled, he's the guy that was probably going to guard Romeo. Yeah, the tough matchup to guard Romeo Langford if you're not at 100%. So, Andy, as you project this game forward, given that information and what we saw, of course, of what Michigan State did at Michigan recently, what do you think are the keys for Indiana to knock them off for the second time this year?
I certainly think being able to shoot the ball well will help, particularly because Michigan State is one of the top teams, if not the top team, in conference play in terms of 2-point and 3-point defense. So that's important. But I really think more so than that, with some of the injuries they've had recently, their offense has been very heavily skewed toward Cassius Winston coming off of a variety of ball screens and trying to get actions out of that. So IU has, as we've said, stepped up defensively of late and strung together a handful of solid defensive performances against some good offensive teams like Purdue and Iowa. And so it will be incredibly important for guys like Rob Finney, who's played really well of late, putting pressure on the ball. Al Durham, those guys have both been really good in recent games, disrupted Carson Edwards, and they'll need to do the same thing with Cassius Winston. I mean, I think if there's one thing to point to, it's how you defend those situations and how you try to bottle him up, particularly with fewer and fewer options. With Michigan State, it's always important to keep him off the glass. But I think Winston is really the guy that you've got to figure out. You're not going to stop him from scoring. But again, kind of similar to what we talked about with Hap, make him as inefficient as you can possibly be and really have a plan with how you're going to guard him coming off of ball screens and stick to it.
And our perimeter defense has been pretty good, recently, especially with Rob Finney finally looking like himself again. Coach, what are your keys to the game on Saturday?
When you think Michigan State, you think of the physical presence of their post-play rebounding and post-presence, and you think of transition basketball. They're one of the best teams in transition basketball. So you want to limit the number of easy opportunities. And with some of their better players hurt, transition is a way to get some open shots for players that they might not be able to get if they had to play in a half court against a set defense. So I think those two things are key. I think actually Indiana may have the advantage inside because of Ward being out with Davis and with Race Thompson now being able to go and Morgan playing in there. They can run a variety of players inside the post. And the other thing to watch is this. When you have an injury, Ward is hurt. Everyone's saying, boy, Michigan State's going to stumble. They go into their arch rival on the road and win. You usually can get a team up to cover for an injury that first game. The second game is sometimes harder to do, especially when it's on the road. Yes, the motivation's there to try to beat Indiana from the previous game, but it's still Indiana, the team that's down in the standings and not as good. And then if McQuaid is hurt, so there's some things that Michigan State really has to cover. And so I think defense for me is always the key, and then being able to score effectively, and the Hoosiers get a win.
When we beat them up there, we did it with Juwan Morgan only playing 13 minutes and with Rob Finney playing 18 minutes, going 0 for 1 from the field, having 0 assists and 5 fouls. I mean, it's amazing. You list some of those things out, and you would never think that we win that game. Obviously, part of it was that Devontae Green made 3 or 4 from 3. But I think, obviously having Rob back the way he's played the last couple games is going to be huge. I'm telling you, I kind of have a gut feeling that Romeo is going to go off in this game. And it's not just about, the McQuaid stuff, but he was really ready for that moment. He didn't shoot great. He was only 4 of 13. He was 2 of 5 from three-point range, but he hit some really timely shots, and he was so into that game. And, after what he did against Wisconsin and finally hitting that, that last-second shot, I wonder if he'll even play a little bit more free now that pressure of finally getting that win and hitting that last-second shot is off. And, we've seen him kind of go supernova for spurts. I would not be surprised if this is his best game as a Hoosier. I kind of have a little gut feeling it may come, and if it does, we'll be in attendance to see it. And that's the kind of thing that can help you beat a team like Michigan State. So, you need your stars to play like stars to beat, good teams like that. And so hopefully Romeo can do it. Any final thoughts on this game, Andy, before we move on?
No, I mean they're all important for IU at this point, given the way they've backed themselves into a corner. So, if nothing else, it at least is a game that lately there haven't been a lot of wins to draw confidence from. I guess at least you could think that this is a team IU's already beat, so maybe they feel good about that. But I do think the depth is going to be a potentially big factor. If you look at the Michigan game, for them, Winston played 40 minutes. McQuaid was pretty close to that. Kenny Goins played 38 minutes. Tillman played 31, and there was a pretty big drop off from there. So even not having one of those guys, if McQuaid really is limited in some way, there aren't a ton of other places for them to turn. And if you can maybe get somebody in foul trouble, do some things like that, get them worn down. It is a team that, albeit not in the Michigan game, has had some turnover issues before. So if you can really ratchet up the defense, can you force them into turnovers and get yourself some easy baskets? That would be certainly important and a big one for IU if they can make it happen.
Libby in the chat mob, our guys need to try to avoid stupid fouls, not always something we can control given the lack of consistency in Big Ten officiating. Very well said. Very, very well said. All right. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we're going to discuss what Indiana needs to do from this point forward to make the final stretch of this season a success, and we play out a few reasonable scenarios and assess what Indiana's tournament prospects would be. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Welcome to everybody here live. And by the way, really good point made by David, who said about my Romeo point of green spirit, but Romeo shouldn't be expected to rescue us. We need to keep doing what we're doing. I agree. Ironically, maybe counterintuitively, part of the reason why I think he's going to have a huge game is because I think some of the pressure is off. Like, because you've got Rob going, you've got other, everybody's healthy. You've got, even though the offense is struggling a little bit, there are at least more options. And now he's got that monkey off his back for the late game. I just wonder if we see an unleashed Romeo because he's feeling a little bit less pressure and because he's got more help and there's more people to take some attention and you're facing a limited team. So I agree. I don't think he needs to do anything more than what he's been doing, but hopefully he'll just feel more free to take it to the basket. And, hopefully we see more of the mid-range. I really liked seeing him take some of those mid-range jumpers against Wisconsin. For a lot of guys, it's not a good shot. For him, I think it is. So I'm just excited to see him play in person and to see Juwan play in person one more time. And Rob Finney. I'm excited to see them all. I'm just excited. I'm excited to get there.
No matter what.
That's true. That is true. We do have to have dinner with Ryan like twice, so that's going to be. That's.
We all have a cross to bear. What can we do?
Have you heard from him? Hopefully, he made it okay.
I don't know when his. I don't know when his flight was. I don't know when his flight was.
He goes dark when he's traveling. You won't hear him for like 36 hours when he's traveling. So
the best part was there was at one point on Twitter, I don't know if he was doing something with Galen, and then he asked him about the weather, and Jen's like, "Why?" She's like, "He's aware that there's like just a weather app on your phone that you can look at. You don't have to ask other people."
Yeah, that's like when I'll have emailed him the run sheet, and then he'll like ask me to put it in the chat. It's like I just emailed it to you. And apparently his computer is the only computer in the world where Gmail and Zoom won't open up together. I don't know that I trust that.
Is he traveling alone or is he with friend?
I believe he is traveling alone. But I can't confirm that, but I do believe he is.
I think that was the original thought. Whether that's changed at any point, I do not know, but I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, man. Okay, so that segment was about almost 20 minutes. So that was a good length of segment. So by the way, yeah, I've never heard from anybody at 14:30. So I mean, we'll just have to listen tomorrow at the normal time and see if it's.
I was gonna say, you have to like send it to send files.
No, I just put it up on the website because they play it on the Big X in Jeffersonville too. So no matter what. I mean, we'll still do it the same way because they play it at 10 o'clock in the morning there,
okay.
right before our radio spot. But I haven't heard from CBS, so I don't know if they're going to keep doing the Banner mornings. I don't know. Kent was my only contact, so I'll have to find out. But I haven't heard. So I guess if you're in Indianapolis, you can let us know if they're playing it. I'm going to try to check on the app tomorrow when it's time. But Josh said he has the flight tracker app. He's going to find Ryan.
It's kind of sad when Indianapolis radio gets rid of the wrong personality.
That was a great point. That's a great point. Okay, let's hop in and do this. So we'll start out. We can all just kind of give a general overview of what we consider to be success. And then did you have a chance to look at any of these scenarios?
I glanced. I looked at them, but it was on my phone, so it'll probably be a little bit easier to read through in here. But
okay. Hopefully my notes make
sense. You did
sense.
something that I was going to look at was those couple teams that had finished with 15 losses the last couple of years. So that was good. Likely scenario.
Yeah, that's good context to hit here at the beginning. Do you want to hit that, or do you want me to hit that?
It doesn't matter. You can.
Okay, I'll hit it real quick and then fire it over to you. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
Chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel. As esteemed chat mobber Chad once put it,
hearing the stuff in between, you get to know you guys a lot better.
Like the time, 2 days ago when Ryan yet again showed how little he still understands our production process here in year 8 of doing the show.
I didn't know you were still on. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're still on. Yeah, we're still on YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, I didn't know. It doesn't matter. We didn't say anything bad.
No, Andy's scoffing at how you still don't understand how the show works.
I thought we were.
We had this exact conversation.
I thought we were off, and it was just three of us talking.
No, this is still on YouTube.
Hi guys,
Jerod, why don't you pull up the sound drop from not very long ago when we made this same revelation?
Now we have two of those sound drops. It just doesn't stop.
My favorite part was that he made, as you were playing the sound clip over it, he was saying almost the exact same thing that clearly showed that the situation had not changed in those couple of weeks. But anyway.
I know. But people would have heard that if I had kept playing it. I tell you, my favorite part of that clip was the way that you scoff at him.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Right there. I've isolated that scoff so that we can use it. So now anytime he does something scoff-worthy, we can use that. Okay. So anyway, join us live at youtube.com/assemblycall. So guys, let's talk real quick. End of the season. We're down to the final stretch. 3 games left, then whatever is ahead of us in the Big Ten tournament. We got this question from Cliff. Throwing the rest of the season out, like we are where we are, here we are, from this point forward, what would it take for you to consider this season a success? Coach, why don't you take the first stab at this?
Well, for me, I'm not looking necessarily at the tourney. We'll talk about some of those scenarios, which is still a possibility, although slim in my opinion. I think the success is maintaining a little bit of momentum here towards the end with 2 or 3 wins, regardless of tournament placement, just getting back to being Indiana basketball that was at the beginning of the season, so that going into the offseason, there can be some hope, there can be some excitement about what's going to happen next year, and end on a note that's a little more positive than the 12 out of 13 game struggle that Indiana had.
Andy, how will you judge it?
I think if they can sustain what we've seen over the last few games, particularly defensively, I think that'll be really important, because so many times during that losing streak, we would kind of get on and there was a lot of things that were said over and over again, but part of it was not really understanding what this team's identity was and the foundation of defense that we felt was there at various points toward the beginning of the season. And certainly last season, that seemed to have gone away, and they've recaptured that over these last few games and really done that. Now it's translated into wins in one of those 3 games, but that concerted effort to really perform well on that end of the floor, I think is what everybody believes this team's identity is going to be under Archie Miller. So at least it's laying the groundwork for that. And I think that becomes really important as a foundational piece. And then you obviously need to figure out how to improve the offense and do some things better on that end of the floor. But I think sustaining the momentum that they've built, albeit in this short stretch, and hopefully that materializes in some wins. But I think being able to see that consistent effort over the rest of the season, no matter what happens, no matter if the games get lost or won, I think becomes important from a cultural standpoint of what's going to be tolerated and what's not going forward.
I like all of that. I agree with all of that. I think right now we're 14-14. We're playing better. We're capable of winning games. I think we need to make a tournament. Like from where we are right now, if we make the NIT, and I say that because I think if Indiana just has a winning record, they will make the NIT because of, just the brand name and because of how many quad 1 wins we have. There is still an unlikely but still possible path to the NCAA tournament, as we'll talk about. But I think we need to be playing in a tournament because I think that extra practice time, just that extra game time for these young guys would be big. And look, we have the majority of our roster now. We should be winning games. Now we're past the disappointment of Minnesota and wondering if the team's going to quit on the season. They're not. They've played really hard for 3 straight games. They had chances to win all of them. They finally got to win. Let's win some games now. Let's win more than we lose. Let's get into the NIT. And who knows, if we get really hot, let's make the NCAA tournament. But I think if we don't make a tournament from this point right now, that to me is a failure from this point on. We'll assess the full season later, but if we're just talking from this point on, I think we need to be playing in a tournament. And I don't really see a good excuse for it not happening. So let's look at we'll kind of call this, the next part of this segment, fun with moderately realistic dream scenarios with our resident expert bracketologist. And I want to make this point real quick just for context, Andy, and you've made it before. But it's important to remember, Indiana currently 14-14. No teams have ever made it into the NCAA tournament with 16 losses as an at-large. That hasn't happened. But 2 years in a row, at least one team has made the tournament as an at-large team with 15 losses. That was Alabama last year. They were 19 and 15. Like Indiana, a very strong strength of schedule. Had obviously some good wins over good teams, which helped them. Vanderbilt then in 2017 at 19 and 15, again, really strong strength of schedule. Both of those teams actually won 2 games in their conference tournament, which is instructive for what we're about to talk about. But no teams have won 16. Now, if a team with 16 losses ever is going to make it, it would probably be one with Indiana's resume. So that's not necessarily disqualifying, but it certainly puts you behind the 8 ball. And the only way for Indiana to finish the regular season with 15 losses would be to win out in the regular season, and then obviously you lose in the Big Ten tournament. If you lose one of these games in the regular season, you're going to have to win the Big Ten tournament to not finish with 16 losses. So that's important to remember. So let me throw a couple of scenarios out to you guys, see what you think about, where this kind of places Indiana, with the understanding that in all of these, I think it's pretty safe to say Indiana would make the NIT, but we're trying to look beyond that and just dare to dream a little bit. We, based on what we've seen, Indiana could come out and lay an egg against Michigan State. I don't expect it, but, we say all this with the caveat that it's a little tough to trust this team, but we're just going to dare to dream a little bit. So, Andy, let's say scenario 1, Indiana wins out. Beat Michigan State, beat Illinois, beat Rutgers. You end the regular season 17 and 14. You're 8 and 12. At that point, you've got 6 quad 1 wins, maybe 7 if Butler can get themselves back up there. You then have a probable 8-9 game versus Minnesota. If you lose that, you're 17 and 15. You win it, you're 18 and 14. I would think at that point you're almost surely in. Then you probably have a game against Michigan State or Purdue. Win that game, you're pretty much guaranteed to be in. But if Indiana wins out, then what do you think they would need to do in the Big Ten tournament to feel good about getting in?
I think it'd need to be at least one win. As you look back at those couple teams, those Vanderbilt and Alabama teams were kind of different the way they went about it. Vanderbilt in 2017 didn't do much of anything in the non-conference except they got a big win over Iowa State in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. And other than that, they swept Florida in the regular season and actually beat Florida again in the SEC tournament to get to what I think was the semifinals there. But they played better. They won 5 of their last 6 regular season games before the conference tournament. So they really took some momentum in. Alabama did the exact opposite. They lost their last 5 regular season games. They had a couple good wins, Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, they had beaten, but they really didn't do anything in the non-conference either. Their best wins were Rhode Island and BYU. So I think the thing that sets IU apart a little bit from them is that they did accomplish some things in the non-conference. Flip side of that is Vanderbilt was over 500 in the SEC, I think 10 and 8, and Alabama ended up 8 and 10. So some potential factors there, but so all of these cases are unique, and part of it is dependent upon the other teams you're going against and all those
how many bid thieves there are.
Yeah, but at this point in the year, the pool of at-large candidates is pretty shallow in the bubble. It feels like usually by the last few days, there's not many people that you're legitimately considering that aren't in your field. But I feel like I'm kind of already at that point. Maybe Brian feels differently as they've gone through this week. But I think if they can win those 3 games, that would give them another quad 1 win against Michigan State. The Rutgers or the at Illinois win would be a quad 2 win. And the Rutgers home game would be a quad 3. So that one doesn't really do anything, but not losing it helps you. And then Minnesota, they're probably in the, they're right 60th today in the net. So neutral court win over them would be a quad 2. I think you could feel, I don't know that I would feel super confident, but, winning those 4 games, having, gone on a 5-game winning streak in total at that point and losing to what's going to be a good opponent. I mean, that's one of the things IU has going for it. They don't have a lot of bad losses. So I'd feel fairly good. If they won 2 games in the Big Ten tournament in that scenario, I'd feel really good.
Coach, what do you think?
I've been getting asked a lot of questions on Twitter with Delphi Bracketology. I think Indiana needs to get to 19 and at least be 19 and 15.
Wow, really?
To be considered. Simply because I have a feeling there's going to be 2 or 3 bid thieves. So that moves, moves up a little bit higher to go up against some teams. The one thing Indiana does have going for it is we really don't know how the committee is going to look at their injuries. If it's 12-2 and then we go 4-0 down the stretch, winning some quad 1 games, and there's discussion about, Green and Davis were out for 3 straight games when we lost at Rutgers, and that maybe at 18 and 15 with some discussion that can get in. I just think I think that's just a tall task to ask for what we've seen in the last 14 games, but we're dreaming here. So yes, I just think they have to at least win out. I don't think they can afford a loss in the regular season and still have NCAA hopes. But
so you don't think there's any scenario where they win 2 going down the stretch? And I mean, I know you would almost have to make it to the Big Ten tournament title game. And again, projecting any success in the Big Ten tournament is foolhardy. But,
I mean, if you lose in the Big Ten title at 19-16, there's some scenarios there, because if you're in the Big Ten title, that game's played at 3:00, and they're going to have to make either a couple scenarios. They might just throw Indiana in then as an at-large late in case they do win, or well, not an at-large, but if they win, that'd be the automatic qualifier. So there's some scenarios if we're dreaming. I just think it's a real slim chance, because other teams are going to win and lose games as well that are around the bubble.
Makes sense. I think the challenge is if you factor in this, winning 2 out of these 3, I think it becomes difficult, because you really can't afford to lose to Rutgers at home, because that's the one that shows up as a bad loss. That's one of the things IU has going for it, is that they don't have a bad loss. So you kind of put that one aside. You can't lose that one. Then you say, all right, well, maybe you lose at Illinois. Again, that's a quad 2 loss, but this is also a team that's 2-9 on the road. So it would do you a lot of good. It sounds dumb to say it, but even to get a 3rd road win, another road win down the stretch becomes pretty important. And then at that point you say, well, you could lose the Michigan State game. Well, that's the one that has the biggest chance to move the needle for you. So it becomes a little bit hard to pick the one. If you're going to say go 2-1 in this stretch, it gets hard to pick the one that you would quote unquote want to lose in that scenario. So I think that's where that part of it gets difficult. So I think,
not to mention, you don't want to have the 16 next to your name.
Yeah. So I think that's, I think that's difficult for those reasons. So I think we're on a pretty similar page. I think you feel a lot better if you do get, 2 wins in the Big Ten tournament plus these 3, which gets you to 19, like Brian said. So I think we're in a similar spot, I think.
Okay. So that's maybe a game further than I was hoping or thinking, but so I'm glad I asked you guys. And so, and obviously, you shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon, and if you land on a star, then you're in the NIT. And I think given where this team was, that would be okay. It wouldn't be ideal, but it's at least nice to know if this team can get hot down the stretch without winning the Big Ten tournament. There does seem to be a scenario, unlikely as it may be, that could get them in. Hopefully, I just hope that we're playing in a tournament. Any final thoughts tournament-wise or down the stretch here for this team?
Just that I'm sorry, making a tournament is so hard. You flip a couple of those games. If Jackson doesn't hit that 3 against Ohio State, that turns the scenario around. If the push-off 3 by Bohannon, everyone loves the kid, but it was an offensive foul on Romeo that was blatant right in front of the unbelievably inept Big Ten official. That's 2 more wins, and we're 16-12, and we're in the tournament talking now. So it's just hard. And when you're facing some adversity like Indiana has, it's frustrating that you got to go 5 more wins in order to get in, but that's just the hand that Indiana's at, realistically. But it'd be fun to start talking about it in a serious way if they won these 3.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, you could pick so many games out of the hat of this series of losses, but I did the same thing at some point earlier this week, where you just look at, if this team had played the way that they have now, they don't lose to Northwestern. They pick, again, as you said, just pick 2 games that you don't lose because you came out and played the way that you have over the last 3 games, or that you won another one of these last 3. We have these just random plays, and then you're, like, to your point, you're 16-12. You've got all these good wins. You have 2 fewer losses. Like, it's almost, with this year's bubble, I'm not even sure you'd be in the first 4 at that point in Dayton at 16-12 with what this team has done. So that's where it gets frustrating. It just shows the margin for error and some of those things. And it's one of those where you want to get excited about how they're playing, but then you kind of get mad because you think about, if it would have been this way a little bit earlier, you could have 2 extra flip 2 losses to wins, and it's a very different conversation that we're having right now.
Make no excuses.
Yeah, no excuses. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, we look ahead beyond this season at the players who will be returning and the signed incoming recruits, and assess who we feel most confident in as building blocks for the future of the program. That's what we're going to talk about next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Nice job, gents.
Yeah, I thought that almost worked better than going through those other scenarios. I think it's really, if you go through game by game, it's hard to talk yourself into being able to lose any of these.
Yeah, no, that's what I was wondering. And you're right. I mean, if one of those potential, if one of those teams loses in their conference tournament and you get some bid thieves in there, that's going to knock everybody else back. So,
I mean, if Oregon wins the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is a bunch of average teams, but if Oregon wins, there's a bid thief that you don't normally think a bid thief comes from the Pac-12. I mean, there can be, Buffalo loses, Wofford loses. Some people are saying Belmont, if they lose, they're going to be in. You're facing a big mid-major push. I just think, man, it's sad and it's frustrating, but
yeah, maybe Nevada in the Mountain West too.
Yeah,
in that category.
Yeah, well, we got some bad bounces and we played some really horrible basketball for a while, so that's what happens.
Yep.
So here we are. Maybe this was 1 week too soon to have this conversation, but you go win Saturday and it starts feeling a little bit more realistic, even though you still have to go play at Illinois, because that's going to be a tough one too.
Yeah.
Hey, just start stringing some wins together, see what the hell happens.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I think if they can get these next two somehow, then it really becomes a far more realistic conversation. You start to have a lot better idea of who they might play in the Big Ten tournament as well, and some of that. But that Big Ten tournament's going to be crazy. The way Penn State came out and just blew the doors off of Maryland last night.
They're ranked, and Torvik, what is it, like in the last month, Penn State is the 7th best team in the country by adjusted efficiency margin. It's insane.
Yeah. This is probably one of those though. If I'm
nice wins.
Yeah, this is one of those though where if I'm a Penn State fan, it feels like, did you play just well enough to save Pat Chambers' job, and then you're going to regret doing this at some point in the very near future? It certainly feels that way to me. But
did their big run start right after that whole hubbub about him pushing Miles Dread?
No,
or was that way before?
I don't think so. I think that was at the beginning of their losing streak. When that one they played? No, that's not true. I forget who they were playing. I thought they were playing Michigan, but that's clearly not true.
Yeah, I don't remember when. I think that was a while back, but clearly, I mean, they've rallied because wow,
I'll have to look at that. I'll look that up.
Andy, another team that's going to face similar to Indiana is Texas. They're 15-13. They have 4 quad 1 wins. They're a high net, but if they finish one game above 500, I'm not sure they're going to get in, even though.
Yeah, their remaining schedule is not good either.
No,
I mean, good for maybe getting more good wins, but
TCU and more so than
after they lost too.
More so than the 15 or 16 losses, I think it's the games above 500 too. Hasn't there only been one team 2 games over 500 in the last 15 or 20 years? Georgia at 17 and 15 or something like that.
I want to say it was like 2001 or something like that. I did look at that at one point when people were asking about IU when they were over 500, which obviously feels like a long time ago. But yeah, I looked at that. I think it was them, and I don't remember. It's been long enough ago that I don't remember the circumstances around that team. But there had to be something odd that happened at some point to be able to do that. But yeah, Texas has Texas Tech and TCU their remaining schedule, so they could be in some trouble.
And then the tournament.
Yeah,
but it's not an official criteria. Other than I think you have to be 500 or better, right? Or one game above 500 to be considered would be the official criteria.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know that actually is a TCU's another one. They 6-9 in the league, and they got Texas Tech and Kansas State coming up next. I mean, they're at home, but still. Oh, well, don't lose to West Virginia then,
We had our meeting at B-Dubs with all the guys, and everyone was all fired up until we got to the 9 seed range, and then everyone just kind of went – they asked for their checks and they started leaving. I'm like, guys, we got to figure out the 9 and 10. And they're like, no, it's so bad. We just leave it, coach.
Mr. Tonsoni, you got this, right?
It's all on you, dude. This is just too much.
Yeah, it gets rough there real fast.
Oh my gosh. They got problems. Huge.
All right, segment 3. Here we go. So we can probably, where are we at right now time-wise? We're about 35-20. We have a few fun questions to get to, so we'll maybe do like 10 minutes for this segment.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, here we go. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason, and then after every game, we send out our detailed post-game analysis. Even when games have 9 o'clock Eastern starts and go to double overtime, we still get that in your inbox by 6 o'clock Eastern the next day, and that is because
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
we try. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That is IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
All right, guys. So I posed this question inside of our private IU basketball discussion community over at assemblycall.com/community, and I thought, got some interesting results. So I wanted to pose it to you gentlemen as well. And that is, as we kind of look for things to watch for, over the final stretch of the season, of all the non-seniors on the roster, so the guys who, are going to be here next year and beyond, plus the guys that are signed for 2019, which right now is, 2 guys, Trace Jackson Davis and Armand Franklin. I want to get who are the 3 players that you feel most confident in being building blocks for the future success of the program. And I think we would all agree that there are more than 3. The reason why I wanted to limit it there is because I want to know who you're most confident in. Like if you had to just, bet your house on these 3 guys being, important people that we look back on and say, yeah, those guys were huge in Archie, getting this thing turned around and getting Indiana basketball back on track. I'm going to assume that all 3 of us are going to say Rob Finney. Is that safe to say? I think we all feel we all feel comfortable with him. So Rob is in. So I guess the question is then, of the other guys remaining, which 2 do you feel most confident in? So you're going to have, you project seniors, Devontae Green, Deron Davis, junior, and this is, without just what we project without any offseason attrition. Juniors, Al Durham, Justin Smith, Clifton Moore. Sophomores, Rob, Race Thompson, Demezy Anderson, Jake Forrester. And then guys who will be freshmen in terms of eligibility next year, Jerome Hunter, Armand Franklin, and Trace Jackson Davis. So, Coach, in addition to Rob, and feel free to speak about him if you like, but what other 2 guys do you feel most confident in as building blocks for the future?
The question most confident can be interpreted in several ways, but I'm going to go this way. I think Deron Davis is key for rebuilding this program because as a senior, a healthy Deron Davis as a leader, I think he has the mentality to be a good leader. And when the team next year is going to have a lot of youth and second-year players, I think that is really important, especially after this year and needing to have some leadership and that stay old, get old, stay old. That's the beginning of that. So I'm going to pick Deron Davis for that. I've just been really pleased with how he's fought back from injury and been tough and been a big part of why Indiana's played well when he's been on the court. When he's been off the court, Indiana has not played well. I think that continues. And then, I think there's 3 players that you can look at as being important. A couple of them we haven't seen because of injury, but I'm going to reach down to Armand Franklin.
Wow.
Because
I like it.
And say that I think he's got that competitive, that fighter that I want to knock you down and tell you that I knock you down attitude. He's developing his shot. I don't know if it's Big Ten ready. High school, it's looked pretty nice. I've talked to a few coaches and the 2 kids that we were recruiting, the young man who went to Purdue and then Franklin. A lot of people liked Franklin, even though the name's escaping me now.
Brandon Newman is the other guy?
Newman was probably a better shooter in his junior and senior year. And I think they're both going to be quality players. But I just think the key to building the program is getting old and staying old. Rob Finney, 4 years, Armand Franklin, 4 years. Those guys that can really bring it while the Trace Jackson Davises and the Romeos come in and out. Those are going to be keys along with good senior leadership. That's what I'd say.
That's interesting because, look, I think you can make an argument for a lot of these guys, and Deron and Armand's names weren't ones that came up a lot in the comment thread there, and they weren't at the top of the list that I was considering, but I think you made great points for both of them. And by the way, if you haven't heard the interview on the Hoosier Hysterics podcast with Armand and his mom, it is well worth listening to. That is a terrific interview, and if you haven't listened to that and you already like Armand, you will come away liking Armand Franklin a lot more after that interview, I promise you. Andy, Rob plus who else for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just to go back to what Coach brought up, Deron is an odd one for me to kind of consider with this because he seems in some ways atypical of the kind of player that Archie is recruiting and wants. But I also think for as in some ways, I feel like people have been somewhat critical of Archie for not, bending in terms of his system and what he wants to do in order to either fit personnel or react to certain scenarios. I do think that's one way in with Duran, again, maybe out of necessity, but Duran's also played well and earned the right to be given that opportunity. I think that's one way he's kind of bent a little bit away from, maybe what he wants to do. I just wondered about picking him because I don't know that there's going to be a lot of guys like him coming in after him. So, but I think your point is valid. And I think with Franklin, just everything you hear about him just strikes you as a real competitor and the kind of guy who is going to probably annoy the hell out of other Big Ten fans for a while. And I will be happy to have a guy like that for the first time in a little while. It feels like that other people kind of love to hate just because he's a competitor and will do whatever it takes to be able to win. At least that's my impression. I haven't listened to that interview yet, so it sounds like that would go in that direction. So I'm going to go. That being said, I'm going to go a slightly different direction in an effort to cover everyone on the roster. So if we're talking about veteran guys on this team, for what that's worth, I'm going to go with Al. I think he has been, from a effort standpoint, has been a guy who really hasn't wavered in that regard over the course of the year. I think we saw really good growth from him from his freshman to a sophomore season, and I would like to think that everything you hear about him is a guy who's really worked on his game, done a lot in that regard. And I think the next step for him is to really be consistent. You saw against Wisconsin, he really exerted consistent effort on the defensive end, but he hit those 3 big threes in the first half and, banked in that one 15-foot jumper. Other than that, didn't score after halftime. So he was really important in the overall scheme of the game, but I think being a more consistent offensive contributor, and it feels like that's a kind of the next logical progression for me as I think about him. And then the other guy, I'm going to go with Race Thompson. Call this recency bias, if you will. But again, I think he's the kind of physical guy that's going to be, you look at I'm going to throw Kenny Goins out just because they're playing Michigan State this weekend. But he's a guy who was a walk-on, really played his way into big minutes, became a good rebounder, has become a really good shooter as he's been there, and is just a solid, foundational, know what you're going to get type of guy. And I think Race can be better than that. But if you just think about that type of player, that type of consistency, the physicality that Archie mentioned, I think he embodies a lot of what Archie's going to want to do and the imprint that he wants to put on things. I think Race is a guy who can take that to the court. So I'm going to go with those three. Although I think there were even some other guys that I didn't mention that I think would be worthy options.
Okay, so just so everybody knows, we did not plan this segment ahead of time outside of me just telling you what the question would be to start the segment. So we didn't plan this to hit as many players as possible. But I do think the fact that, we all agreed on Rob. So it's there's the anchor for the next 3 years of the program. And so far you guys have chosen different people and I think made great arguments for all of them. And I'm picking 2 other guys that you guys haven't said. And these are the guys that I was going to go with. Now, I'm a little worried about them simply because we haven't seen them play, but I think they may be the 2 most overall talented players that are on the roster next year, and that's Jerome Hunter and Trace Jackson Davis. Now, Jerome, we've talked about, how, he's recovering from a leg condition. He just got cleared to start doing, non-contact basketball activity, but it's kind of one of those risk rewards for me where I think, kind of the reward of picking him and trusting him, and who knows? I mean, if he really gets back, he could be a guy that's only here for a couple of years because he has that kind of talent. But I just think he seems like a guy that's fully bought in, that has a great attitude. I still remember listening to an interview with him. I think he was matched up against Darius Bazley or somebody in high school, and just how personally he took that and how competitive he is. And I loved seeing that. Combine that with his skill, and I think how good of a defensive player he'll be as well. And I'm hoping for the health and banking on the talent and the mindset because I think he can be absolutely huge. And then I've got to go with Trace, because number one, he continued, the in-state 5-star big-name prospect coming to Indiana. He seems like he has a similar mentality to Armaan Franklin. I mean, just seems like a guy who's going to work hard. And, he's kind of the best kind of 5-star prospect to get, where he's really, really good, but he's not going to be ready to be a one-and-done, most likely. And for what he does is a little bit undersized at the next level. So it will probably take him 2, maybe 3, possibly even 4 years at Indiana. And that's without him coming in and playing poorly. He just doesn't right now project at the next level. So I think we'll have him for a little while. And I think with Juwan gone, and hopefully we get a lot out of Duran next year, and he helps ease the pressure on Trace. But then to have Trace kind of anchoring the post for the next, 2, maybe 3 years after that, I think that'll be really important. So, look, I think I'm glad that the segment went like this. I wasn't quite sure how the segment was going to go, but I think if you're looking for reasons to be positive about the program, the wins and losses haven't been here this year. But it really does feel like if we can add some shooters, and obviously we have to add more to the roster. And, you need, if Devontae Green's going to be here, Justin Smith and, Clifton Moore, all these guys that are going to be upperclassmen, they obviously are going to need to progress. And same thing with Demezy and Jake, who we didn't mention. But it really does seem like there are some building blocks you can trust moving forward, where even though you lose guys like Romeo and Juwan, you can still feel good about the depth of the roster, the overall talent, and what this team will be able to do, because a lot of these guys that we've talked about are Archie Miller's guys. And so that's, at least, on a down season, that's something to feel good about moving forward. So,
yeah, I think the Hunter is interesting. I think he would be one that I would have picked if you guaranteed me that he was going to be healthy, that he was going to be there. I think that was the only hesitation that I had, or he would have been, one of mine for sure. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. I think they all make sense. Trace, it's again an opportunity to show for Archie to show his development of a front court player in that way. He's got Juwan now, but he was there. Juwan's taken on a different role, a more prominent role, I guess, since Archie was there, but it's a chance for Archie to really be able to show, hey, here's what I can do with a talented big guy that comes in. So I think that's important for the program, wins and losses for sure, but also just from a recruiting standpoint, I think that becomes important. So, I think what you like a lot about the guys that we talked about is we all have used the term like competitor a number of times. And I think those are, the kinds of guys that you really want, as cliche as that sounds, to really have guys that hate to lose and really are competitive in that way. I think there's a lot of guys like that. And I think Finney, that's one of the things that it's probably natural to pick the guy who you believe is going to be the point guard. That makes him the obvious choice, like you said, but I think people would say the same thing about him, just his competitive nature and those kinds of things. So I think you're starting to see some commonality between the makeup of the guys that are there and common traits that this staff is clearly looking for.
Have you ever seen a fan base trust a freshman quicker than the IU fan base trusted Rob Finney? Like there's just such a trust with him, when he's healthy and right.
Wait till Armand gets here.
Yeah, him too. That's what you want. The more guys that you can trust, man, that is what you want as a coach. That's what you want as fans, and that's what you want on your team. You want, teammates who can trust each other. So
real quickly, it's so important to get your guys in a program, high school, college, pro. Get the guys that you want to coach, and that's difficult when you're taking over a program. And I think we're seeing Archie's dudes starting to flow into the program. That's what we talked about in this segment.
Yep. All right, coming up in our final segment, with whatever time we have left, we will answer your questions. We have to help out a new father who has asked us for some advice. We will do that. And then we got asked who our all-time hated Big Ten players are. So we'll talk about that as well. Stick with us. All right. Yeah, I always hesitate a little bit on segments like that because you don't necessarily want to leave guys out. But, man, we pretty much covered everybody.
Hit damn near everybody.
That was good.
Well,
man, we went long, too, but that's okay.
You leave out a guy like Demezy and Jake, and they are specialty guys that you have to round out the backside of the roster with, at least when they're young. If Demezy can come in and advance his play and you need some shooting, you can throw him in there. If you need energy, Jake Forrester can be that energy guy afterwards. I think those are vital parts of the Indiana program. Trusting to be the stud or the stud of a class is the way I took that question. And I think you have some questions, and I said it in the chat. I'm not going to mention names, but I think some of the upperclassmen, if the APR situation and whatever situation is, might be elsewhere next year. And again, respectfully, don't want to discuss it because I like all people who wear the Indiana jersey. But if I were a coach, I'd be having some discussions and maybe head out and get a couple grad transfer shooters.
You need guys who are bought in. And if people aren't bought in, it does no one good for them to be here. So, these are topics for the offseason, and we'll see what happens. But, I mean, that's not even necessarily being critical or unfair. I mean, a coach needs guys that are bought in, and, vice versa. A player needs to play for a coach who's bought into him. So the quicker you get that, then you can get everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yep. To go back to your prior question about the Penn State thing, it was against Michigan, so I was right about that. I thought it was a home game, but it was an away game. But that was the Pat Chambers Miles Dredd incident was in the first loss of 8 straight. So that was not not apparently the turning point.
Okay.
Things have turned for them, but that wasn't.
Maybe it was just a delay, and then maybe 8 games later they had a team meeting and got on the same page about communication, but they recognized that the problem happened long ago.
There you go.
I'm drawing a parallel to Indiana, frustrated that we didn't get this turned around after the Nebraska game.
They went 0-8 in January, so that was they did not win a game in January. That seems bad.
My. And now they're turning it right around.
Yeah, who knows?
Okay, so we don't have long here. We have 2 minutes and 27 seconds.
I didn't realize how long that went. I wouldn't have said so much.
It's okay. We'll hit. Maybe we'll save the most hated players for afterwards. By the way, one thing I have started doing after like the 4th segment, both for the radio show and for the post game show, I'll keep recording and then I tack it on to the end of the podcast, so the podcast people can get some of the post show stuff. Not if it goes on basketball, but if we're going to talk basketball, like hit an extra topic here, then I'll add it.
Yeah, hated players.
Don't even try and explain that to Ryan because
I wouldn't even. Maybe over a few beers this weekend, we can really get the ins and outs of it.
The podcast is off?
Yeah, the podcast is off. We ended the podcast a long time ago.
So we're just on YouTube.
This
Ryan,
is
do you
AC After
even
Dark.
understand how this works?
No, not at all.
God's sake.
No, I thought this was recorded on the podcast.
No. We don't. Okay. Once the music is over, we stop.
Okay. 8 years, never hosted.
Oh man, that one is never gonna get old.
No, there's some of them. There's some of them, and then coaches about the lady that had hip surgery, doing more than the players in the warm-ups was another one that when you played that, I had the same reaction the second time I heard it as I did the first, which is always a good sign.
Shoot, where did I put that one? I need to.
My wife always asks me what did I say stupid that's going to be on the next drop after I go up.
Well, now it's going to be that. What we really need is someone recording at Crazy Horse, and then we can pull some drops from there. Don't think the audio would be good enough.
Yeah, that's it. That's the reason not to do that, because the audio
quality. Okay, so we'll hit Jonathan's question real quick because I want to congratulate him on the birth of his son, and then we'll see. So think of your best advice for a young father to cheer while he's holding a sleeping infant. How do what's your best advice for that? And then we may have to save the hated folks for afterwards on the podcast. So just watch. I'll give you a signal if we have to get out. All right, here we go. You're listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Guys, let's hit as many questions as we can here. First question from Jonathan Goodman, who, congrats to Jonathan, who just welcomed a son, Iman, 5 hours after the Iowa loss. So Iman is 1-0. Having just defeated Wisconsin, so congratulations there. But Jonathan wants to know, as you were all fathers, because he knew that Ryan wasn't going to be on the show, could you demonstrate some cheers when something really exciting happens during a game, but you were holding a sleeping infant? Because really, Coach, what you got to do, you got the infant in one arm. You definitely have to do the one arm. And then you have to be able to move that arm as much as possible and release all of the happy energy, but have a tight hold so that you're not moving the infant very much. And then I also try to use a lot of facial expressions, like overdo my facial expressions, because that helps to channel some of the enthusiasm too. So that was how I handled it. How about you?
It depends if you're standing or sitting. If it's a close game, you got to pace and you're holding. Then I say the one arm stuff. If you're seated and have your legs up on the couch, you could do a little leg kick. That won't endanger the infant. And so that's what I've done. You could always, if it's a Purdue game, there's certain salutes you can give towards West Lafayette with one hand and one gesture, one arm, that the young infant won't know is is dangerous quite yet. So, those are all things that I probably have done with my two boys. But I will tell Jonathan that as they grow older, you can put them in candy stripes. And when you beat Purdue, you can put on the music in 20-degree weather and go outside the front yard in Purdue territory and dance like crazy. Nothing's better than raising an Indiana fan. Congratulations, my friend.
Andy, quickly, what is your advice for celebrating with a sleeping infant in your arms?
That's a tough one. You just gotta stick with like fist pumps and things like that, or some way to stifle yourself. But you do not want to wake the sleeping baby. As may have already learned, the most important thing that you need is the quiet and to allow the child to sleep. So if that means putting the child first, as you will do many times, and stifling your own enthusiasm momentarily, that's the way to go.
Yes, it is. All right, that's going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to hear us talk about hated Big Ten players, go listen to the podcast because we'll do it there. And if you ever want to see us do the show live, join us on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording over at assemblycall.com. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you. Actually, Chad and Josh and Will will talk to you after the Michigan State game. Keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Talk about poor late game execution. Just trying to squeeze too much into the final song there. Okay.
For a minute there, you were Romeo running to the corner on that inbounds play.
Yeah, I really was. Gotta be better than that at the end of the show. How many times have I done that outro now? Well, yeah, because I forgot. I wanted to let everybody know that the Michigan State game, Will's hosting, and then it's Chad Schwartzkopf, who's done a couple recent post-game shows, and then Josh Wilson, who hosts the Inside Out podcast and has joined us for Banner Monday. So they will be with you, although I think we'll probably try and pop on like as we drive to Crazy Horse after we leave the arena. We'll probably try and pop on our phones. So we might be there, but those guys are going to handle the heavy lifting for what is hopefully a very victorious and fun episode. Hopefully it'll be the first time that Will has thought about basketball in about 4 years since he was on the show with us. So Chad and Josh need to be ready to really do the heavy lifting, but Will brings the technical expertise and can knows how to host. He's a professional post-game show host, so I trust him. But if he tries to talk basketball, we could get ourselves in trouble. It's okay.
What are you going to do?
It is okay. 4 years later, he still understands the technical part of the show better than Ryan.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's hit this other question real quick before we get out of here since we teased it. This is from Adam. This may be a better question for after the season, but we're going to take it now. What would be your all-time Big Ten hated players team? Ethan Happ, Aaron Kraft, Brian Cardinal. How do you narrow them down to one team? Ha-ha. I would say recent entrants to that list that we can all agree on, Jordan Bohannon and CJ Jackson.
Yep.
Screw both of those guys. And I say that with a tremendous amount of respect for them. Screw them both for all the big shots they've made. It's the best, I'm sure those guys, they like being hated by IU fans. The biggest name that comes to mind for me, I just always hated him when I was growing up. And I don't know if the empirical evidence backs it up, but I always felt like Jamie Skelton hit big shots against us when we played Ohio State. So I've never liked him. I've never liked Nick Anderson because 7-year-old me was just absolutely crushed being at the game when he made that shot. So those two guys definitely come to mind. It's more just because they hit big shots against us. It's not like I didn't like them as players or anything like that.
Yeah.
What about you? What about you guys?
Chris Kramer is one that definitely comes to mind from Purdue.
But that's just because you just didn't like him, right?
I thought that's what the point of this whole exercise was.
No, but not necessarily like that he made a bunch of big shots. Like
no,
me, it was just kind of annoying.
That guy for me was Chad Austin though, because
no.
Yeah, a number of times.
I hadn't thought about him in a while.
Spoiled some games there. So if you want to think about Purdue guy and making big shots, it would definitely be him.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I'd like to go through team by team and just give a series of players that I do not like, but that's probably maybe we'll do that this weekend. But
Woodbury, Brian Tuhi. I hope I pronounced that right.
Adam Woodbury.
That is
the guy who poked everybody in the eye, but it was always an accident.
He couldn't guard anybody, so he just jammed fingers in people's eyes. But those big centers at Purdue, Scheffler and Rowinski back in the day.
Oh man,
I mean, they couldn't play, and they always ended up with 15 and 10 points.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Who else are we getting here in the chat mob? Yeah, we've got Costello from Michigan State.
Kraft was one.
Yeah, Kraft and Cardinal are a couple of easy ones.
Kelsey Barlow.
Kelsey Barlow. Yep. Yeah, we're getting a lot of Adam Woodbury is the worst in the chat mob.
I don't know. He didn't really do anything to IU, did he? I mean, he was a.
No, I think people just generally didn't like him.
That's fair. I mean,
but he might have done something once. I feel like there was something.
Mitch McGarry.
Yeah, he was only around for one season.
Brian Butch, that was another one. I was kind of go through Wisconsin guys that I really didn't like, which is a pretty long list at this point. Although many of those guys I'm probably confusing with one another, but
they all just blend together.
Yeah, they're just like churning out.
And Iowa always seems to have guys that are just there forever that can get kind of annoying.
Jacob Jakes was one that nobody liked, but I give him a break because when Michael Lewis drilled him in the face with the ball, that was fine. Blake Hoffarber, that would be another one.
Oh yeah,
because then you had to hear about it, and then every time the Big Ten tournament is, and that gets brought up again about this, and then that was not good. Yeah, I was trying to just go through different teams and then figure out who on that team in the past. Michigan State feels like there should be more.
Okay, see, I was just going to say that, and I'm wondering if it's a little bit sad that there aren't more Michigan State players because they've dominated us so much that it's almost like we go into a lot of those Michigan State games kind of feeling like we're not quite at their level, so we don't hate their players as much because we haven't won at their place. We need to get back to their level and rise above them so that we hate their players more.
I'm looking in recent years on Michigan State. I feel like there has to be somebody.
I got to represent the old group. Weber.
Chris Webber, the Fab Five guys. Like you could say someone like Glenn Robinson, but he was just awesome. I mean, I obviously hated that he played for Purdue, and it was, annoying that he would play well against us, but he was just a great player. So I didn't really hate Glenn Robinson.
Oh, I remember
Rex
at Michigan
Chapman.
State. Yeah, a Michigan State guy, Adam Ballinger. That guy always seemed to hit big shots against IU.
Yep. Yeah, we'll find some Michigan State guys.
This is going into just a dark place as I'm like scrolling through these.
It is. We're pulling out all of our worst IU basketball memories here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking through like Ken Palm going back toward the beginning of it and seeing who's there. Yeah, this is depressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Neitzel was another one on.
Oh, Drew Neitzel. Yeah, but for some reason they haven't had as many of the.
Sorry, Jen.
Oh yeah, because Andy's going to be in a bad mood now.
No, not her, not that Jen. Jen in chat.
Oh,
I threw out the word "old" in referring to people who played when she was in college. Sorry.
Okay, well
mindset, Jen.
We could probably do this forever.
Yeah, probably not good for our long term.
No, it's not. Health, hey, no, let's think of happier things. So we'll all be there. We're getting in tomorrow, little team dinner, and then the game on Saturday. So
yeah, should be fun.
Looking forward to it. Do we get any other good ones?
Lawrence
Funderburk, Draymond Green, Gary Harris. Okay, so people are coming up with the Michigan State guys.
Yeah, a few of those. Yeah, I'm sure there's some more from formative years that I would come up with if I sat long enough and thought about it.
Who was the big center that Michigan State had? That was back from the Respert when Sean Respert and Eric Snow played there. They had a big Scheffler-like center, and I think his name started with an S, like Stepanovich or Stiginga. Matt Stiginga.
Matt Stiginga. He was a person that existed.
He was indeed a person that existed.
Matt Harms has made his way onto this list at this point, right?
Yeah. Matt Harms is definitely on there.
With coaches too.
Mm.
Although there hasn't been a lot of turnover lately.
Yeah. Okay, Jen said, who would other teams say are their most hated IU players of all time?
Coverdale.
Will Sheehy?
Sheehy would be one.
Sheehy would definitely be one.
I mean, the guy that Devin Dumas punched in the nuts probably didn't like him very much. But that's a pretty small audience who really was bothered by that guy.
The Devin Dumas era was not long enough nor prolific enough to really generate too much hate besides the guy who got his balls smashed. That is true. Yeah, Josh is right. People probably did hate Cody Zeller. I mean, just because he's Cody Zeller. One of those players that you hated because he was good.
I don't know. I'm trying to think who there would be. I mean, there was probably a lot of guys.
Dane Fife.
There you go. Yeah, that would be one. I mean, I don't know that Cheney was a guy. I mean, he was a guy that you wouldn't like because they were good. I remember. Who was it that won Big Ten?
Oh, Damon Bailey. I bet people didn't like Damon Bailey just because he was the big time recruit.
Was it Jim Jackson who won Big Ten Freshman of the Year over Calvert?
They weren't freshmen the same year.
Or was it Michael Finley? It was one of those. I remember I harbored ill will against whoever it was that beat him out for some award for.
It was Jackson, but he went pro early. He went
pro early, but I think they started the same time. And
You're
I remember
right. They did.
I did not like him because I felt that Calvert had been wronged by not winning that award. But I don't know that Calvert was a guy that, I mean, you didn't like him because he was so good, but I don't know that you didn't like him because if you're thinking about didn't like him because of the way that he played.
Louisville fans might not. Dwayne Morton might not, but screw them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
We can carry this conversation on at the Crazy Horse. So meet us there 3:00 after the Michigan State game. We hope to see you all there. Looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep, should be a good one.
By this time tomorrow night, dinner will be over. No telling what could be going on.
No telling.
No telling.
No telling.
Hey,
Brian,
Mrs. T's not coming. It's going to be look out Bloomington.
I was just going to ask if she was coming.
I'm going to hit the dance floor. I'm going to be the legend. Look out, sports. I'll be popping the collar. Popping the collar.
Popping the collar.
Buying champagne for everyone on her credit card. It's going to be a good weekend. Ryan, I'm taking care of you. Tomfoolery.
Lots of tomfoolery. Okay. Let's go get this posted. Get a good night's sleep because I don't know there's going to be a good night's sleep over the next 2 days.
Perhaps not.
We will see you guys tomorrow, and we'll see you all. We'll be posting content while we're there. We won't, and we'll probably see you on the show after the Michigan State game.
Yeah. Oh, hey. So, Jerod, do you want me to just bring the microphone? Do I need to bring any? I don't know what they want. I mean, I have an idea of what they would want to do with it, but
I don't know. Yeah, I think just bring the microphone. I don't know what they want to do with it either.
Okay.
So just bring it. Maybe just bring your microphone stand if you can stick it in the back of the car. Who knows if they'll want it?
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll throw it in there.
Okay.
So
sweet.
Safe travels, everyone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same to
Sounds
you.
Good.
See y'all this weekend.
All right. Take care.
Sounds good.
See y'all.